I don't know. Drugs are out, sex is out, politics are out. Everything is on hold. I mean, we definitely need something new. I just keep waiting for some new voice to come out of somewhere and just say, hey. On to business. I got my wild cherry Diet Pepsi, and I got my blackjack gum here, and I got that feeling. Yeah, that familiar feeling that something rank is going down out there.
Friday once again.
Good. You're not coming home. Where can I go then? You can go to the gutter where you belong, you filthy pig.
The stuff that dreams are made of. Huh?
A boy wonder with a typewriter and a lightning rod that stormed the castle at 13 and spent the next 4 decades of his life burning the banners of comic mediocrity in the name of quality. His name was Jim Shooter, a man large in stature and influence. Some said he ruled like Caesar, but with less diplomacy and more footnotes. Tonight, we look behind the man, behind the walls of DC, Marvel, and Valiant, eventually looking at a man of the atom. But first, allow me to read some words from men that worked for Shooter. The awe, the agony, admiration, and acrimony. These are their words. These are their scars. Chris Claremont said this: I have no pictures, but more Jim Shooter stories than one can shake a stick at. I think the best is almost 50 years ago when Jim was editor-in-chief and I, among others, were talking about Spidey's possible guest stars for team-ups. I mused that it would sure be cool to guest the newly premiered Not Ready for Primetime Players. So Jim said, why don't you call him? And I say, disbelievingly, are you serious? And Jim says, why not? And so I do. And they don't believe a word. But they call back. Marvel Comics, Jim tells them, who he is and what we're doing. Long story short, in hardly no time at all, we have a deal. And with almost the entire original cast. And then, sometime later, Jim calls me in and asks what I'm doing. I say, working, of course. Why? He says, John Belushi will be here in 30 minutes. Well, I'll be there in 25. And I am, and he is. And it's great. And then Shooter has this moment. John tells me I'm really funny, and I thank him, telling him thank God, because he has no idea how hard it is to write comedy, because I have no idea how hard it is to write comedy. And Belushi looks at me like I'm a dope, because I have no idea he writes for the show. And Jim reaches over John's head. Yes, he was that tall, if not taller, and whacks me on the back of the head, saying, don't worry, John, we only let Chris out on special occasions. And John laughs. Jim could be a boss. He could drive you crazy, but he could also save your butt and do you a serious solid. You could love him, you could hate him, and often you did both. Val Merrick says this: much has been written and said about Jim Shooter since his passing, mostly regarding his work and contributions to the comic industry. I'd like to offer a different perspective. Jim was one of my karate students. How did that come about, you may ask? Allow me to explain. I earned the rank of black belt, second degree in Okinawan karate in 1975. I moved to New York City in 1977. Once I settled there, I went to work at Continuity, Neil Adams' studio, where I met Dennis Cowan, who was also a martial arts practitioner at the time. We would chat about having a regular place to train and work out. Eventually, through a series of unlikely events, I was able to procure a space to train folks, and people began to sign up, many of them from the comic book world. Among my students were Jim Starlin, Al Milgram, and Carl Potts, to name just a few. Later on, after hearing about the class, Jim Shooter joined us. People study martial arts for a variety of reasons. It's all personal, and I never ask students why they sign up. Some sign up to learn self-defense. I don't think that was Jim's primary reason, him being 6'7" and all. Whatever his reason, he was very serious about it. He was unassuming, but a focused student. He was humble in his interactions and never once brought to bear the fact that he was an editor-in-chief and the tallest guy in class. Don't get me wrong, all my students were committed and got along with each other. But when Jim came to class, he was different than the editor in the office. He seemed to really enjoy it and was intent upon learning something. In other words, he exhibited good character. Years later, I worked with on some comic projects when he was an editor at Valiant, and we got along just fine. Rest in peace, Mr. Shooter. Jim Shooter passed from this mortal coil on June 30th of this year at the age of 73. And tonight, we'll be looking at arguably what I think is probably his best offering from Valiant, which is the first couple issues, more than likely just the first issue, issue 1 of Solar Man of the Atom. But first, allow me to introduce my co-host, because it's been a couple of weeks. JP, how have you been over the last 3 weeks?
Oh, good. You know how you accidentally launch a book that you forgot all about?
I've done that easily half a dozen times myself.
Yeah, I did that. Ghost launched Noirlum on Fund My Comic. Go check it out.
Absolutely. We've got it right here. In fact, why don't we show everybody? We can share with the class.
Yeah, did absolutely no promotion. I realized it had been live for about 8 minutes, and yeah, there you go.
There you go. We've already got one backer. And this is let's talk a little bit about this real quick before we get into the context of the show. This is the campaign that we've talked about. If you want a copy of Noirlum Listen, you can just head right on over to barnesandnoble.com, type in Noirlum, and it'll pop right up, and you can order yourself a copy. This is explicitly just for catch-up copies and a signature copy, which we scroll down here. Here's your catch-up. Noirlum 1 and 2, each is 90 pages, signed and shipped in a Gemini mailer. And then you can order, if you've already got Noirlum 1, you can just sign up for Noirlum 2 for $20 plus shipping for the signature edition. And these are copies that you are personally signing.
No, yeah, I don't have an auto pen. But there's also links at the bottom of the page if you're not interested in a signed copy. All the links to all the different outlets. If you're in the UK, there's a couple bookstores in your country that you can get it from. There's one in there from Australia for Eric Grant to get a book, and nobody else probably. But yeah.
All right, so Noirlum Listen at Barnes & Noble, Powell's Books, Walmart, and Books A Million in the U.S. In the UK, Noirlum Listen at Foyles and Waterstones. And for those random people that live in Australia, which is a country that doesn't actually exist, you can go to get Noirlum Listen at the Nile. So congratulations, man. Congratulations on your Ghost launch.
Yeah.
How are you feeling about it overall?
The Ghost launch in particular? Well, I forgot about it, so I guess I don't feel anything.
Okay, then. So I guess before we turn to the chat, because it's been man 3 weeks since we had a gutter, which is the longest break we've had here on the gutter. And normally around the first week of July, I do a dedicated series to Steve Ditko. However, circumstances being what they were, both with Shooter's death, having to prep for this show, and then a variety of personal issues that came up with my family around that time, it just didn't work out. So part 3 of the Steve Ditko tribute. It might still happen this year if I have time. More than likely, I'm just going to table it until next year. And this will kind of be our placeholder for that celebration of someone that I consider a great within the comic world. And maybe we start alternating. Even number of years, I might do a Ditko episode. Odd number of years, I might do a Shooter episode or a Neil Adams episode or whoever.
Kirby?
Yeah, something on Kirby would be great too. I mean, I've done a couple of readings of some stuff from Kirby, but
Jim
it's
Varney.
Yeah. But with that being said, let's move right along. So, dude, before I turn to the chat, I did want to ask you: have you ever read any of Shooter's stuff before, or is this a first for you?
I probably have, but I don't have the storage in my brain to remember the names of people because I filled those up with the rosters of the Philadelphia Phillies in the 1980s. So
That's
I don't have
understandable.
I don't have that memory that you have to just like recite names. So I'm gonna have to answer maybe. But this
Gotcha.
was pretty fantastic.
Yeah, I do tend to agree with that. I need to make a whole lot of wrenches on this channel, apparently, that I haven't done that. Everybody's yelling at me. But Citizen Ronan is joining us. He says, being first in the gutter is being last in the gutter. I actually, in order to do that, I think I have to actually change over to this in the chat. And then, don't mind me, I'm just doing all the admin stuff that I should have done a long time ago. There we go. Now I can start making add as moderators.
Would it help if I ask you questions to fill the time?
That would help, actually.
So can you explain a little bit about the self-evident series that this was based on that I didn't really get that it was based on until the character jumped out of another character's skull?
Well, so we can talk about that for sure. Well, there's, and I guess
Because I thought it was a really clever way. of hiding that story within the story.
It is. Shooter. So, man, I had a plan for how I was going to do this, and you just kind of torpedoed that. But let me talk a little bit about Shooter first. So, Jim Shooter himself he's a wunderkid, right? He at the age of 13 in mid 1965, Shooter wrote and drew pencil outlines for stories featuring the Legion of Superheroes, and he just mailed them to DC, and he just would keep on mailing them. And then on February 10th, 1966, he received a phone call from editor Mort Wingsinger, who wanted to purchase the stories that Shooter had sent. And he commissioned Shooter to start writing for Supergirl and Superman stories. And eventually they offered Shooter a regular position on Legion and wanted Shooter to come to New York and spend a couple days in the office. And Shooter, who was 14 at the time and living in Pittsburgh, had to wait until he got out of school. And then he went to New York with his mother. And primarily the reason he was doing all this was his family was like this desperately poor, and any money that he could get in was valued. And then flash forward 1976, he gets hired in at Marvel. And from 76 to 78, he's an associate editor at Marvel. And here's a picture of Mr. Shooter and Jim. And then I apologize, guys. I'll get to your comments here. I just want to get through this so we can move on. From 78 until 1987, at the age of 26, Jim Shooter was promoted to editor-in-chief, leading to what is widely considered the greatest era of Marvel Comics, if not comic stories in general. This also followed a 5-year span where Marvel had burned through 5 editors-in-chief. But Shooter's impact was immediate on Marvel Comics. He, in addition to just restoring editorial stability and enforcing deadlines on artists, much to the chagrin, I might add, of the traditional egotistical artists, he oversaw and helped guide the early careers of major talents. Frank Miller, John Byrne, Chris Claremont, Walt and Louise Simonson all got their first major swing at the bat under Shooter. He was not shy about giving somebody that showed talent and had ability a chance at the big game. And without failure, almost everybody he gave a shot is a legend that we consider today. He oversaw and helped guide the careers of all of these people, in addition to assisting in coming up with almost every major event storyline that you associate with comics from the 80s. The Dark Phoenix Saga, Days of Future Past, of course, Secret Wars in 84, which was the first major crossover event for Marvel Comics. Also, following DC's implementation of creator royalties, Shooter used his position to implement them at Marvel, as well as improving working conditions and deadlines for writers and artists. And although the cracks in his authoritarian style were definitely starting to be witnessed, even from the outside at this time, he was still really beloved because of some of these things. In 1987, though, after multiple confrontations with upper management and especially artists, Shooter would be forced out at Marvel. In 87, in 89, over the next 2 years, he worked with an investment group headed by Steve Malarski, and Shooter created Valiant Comics. And its goal was to do everything that he had enforced at Marvel, and Marvel was already drifting away from in the late 80s, which was to have a cohesive superhero universe with tight continuity and high quality storytelling. And he accomplished that up until he was forced out at Valiant several years later. But with all of that being said, allow me now to catch up on some of the comments here. As I scroll up to the top, Kayla has joined us. But if you're in the gutter, you are already decided to lose. The first step is always the hardest, says Citizen Ronan. And then Citizen Ronan and Kayla go on a long string of chatting. And we got Snugs joining us. Great to see you, Snuggy. And I'm sorry, guys, I'm a little rusty here at the gutter helm here. Awesome One says, dude, great to see you. Rest in peace, the other channel. Not at all. The Lord Crackhead comic channel is still alive and well. Wednesdays at 10:30 for usually about 90 minutes. JP and I run the show over on that channel. So we all still want to see you over there. And I'm kicking around an idea for another show that we might be doing intermittently over there. More announcements on that as stuff comes up. But people are asking about the IndieGoGo buyout that's going on. We will be talking about that next Wednesday. And scrolling down, Einbrecht has joined us. Great to see Einbrecht. Hail chat, hail panel. Good to see you, my friend. And Dale A has joined. Dale, man, I owe you a response. I got your book. I've had it for a while. I still need to get back to you. And also, I've got that the standee that I need to get back to you, man, that you accidentally sent me. But do you ever wonder what Raiden Radio does during the opening monologue? My guess is he takes that chance to just go grab a smoke. That's my guess. Scrolling down, refund Eudaimonia to back New Harlem. No, don't do that. Back both often. Henry Bemis is here. Oh crap, I'm not wrenched on here. Well, let me resolve that, Mr. Bemis, as soon as I can find you in the chat. There you are, and now I can wrench you at his moderator, standard moderator. Thank you. There you go. Raiden checks the levels on his craft beer during monologuing. I don't think Raiden, you're not a craft beer guy, are you?
Oh, hell no.
Yeah, I didn't think so. That's just Hojo's bag. What else we got? Scrolling down, I apologize if I miss you. I'm moving pretty fast here so we can catch up because, man, this is act for shooter.
It's like riding a bike in the gutter.
It is. It's just a little more hectic here. I had a plan and it's already gone off the rails. Jason Sandberg has joined us. Good to see Mr. Sandberg. Always a pleasure. Shooter reigned in the hippies and Unchained Burned Miller and Simonson. Amen to that, man. He certainly did. If you close your eyes and listen, the New Universe title pitches, they sound like modern Image comics. They do. They do indeed. That is an excellent call. Einbrecht says Shooter did a phenomenal job in his early days. I can't speak to his later stuff as I'm not familiar with his post-Marvel work. There is some absolute magic that happens at Valiant in those first few years. And we're going to go over that one of those books tonight, which is Solar Man of the Atom, which is both an homage and a beautiful entry starting point into what he was trying to create over at Valiant. And with that being said, Citizen Ronan's last comment, that's because Rini called you awkward, awesome one. Well, there you go. There was a video yesterday that asked for dislikes if you dislike the choice someone else made. Well, that's not cool. But yeah, so here we already showed Mr. Shooter and Stan. Here's the Jim Shooter in the Marvel Handbook talking about him, well, who he is and what he does. I do agree with Rob Liefeld, and so hell is officially frozen over. This was a wonderful obit in the New York Post. Jim Shooter, editor who saved the comics industry, dies at 73. He brought order and profits to Marvel in the 1980s and helped establish the genre as a pop culture tentpole for decades to come. And I think that even undersells what he meant to comics. And, when he died, there were a lot of artists that were pouring out admiration for him, which was funny because weeks earlier, they would have been the same people that threw him underneath the bus. And I think this is true for a lot of people. It's really hard for artists to admit that the main people that moved comics and made comics as important they are as pop culture weren't artists. They were writers, they were editors, they were people that loved the medium. And it's nothing to disparage artists. It's just the people, Stan Lee, Jim Shooter, they can be said in the same sentence for people that elevated comics to a different level. And that's just who they are, man. These two guys right here are responsible for a great deal of what we all love and cherish. And Valiant, it's themselves, did a very nice send-off. And then, of course, here's Mr. Shooter just recently before his passing. And then a nice 4-up of Jim and all of his various stages of life. And God bless him, man. He was a beautiful man. And with that being said, I think we can dive right into tonight's book, which is, of course, from Valiant Comics, which Jim founded before being forced out very early in their lifespan because it's just money. But we will be talking primarily tonight about Solar Man of the Atom, issue 1. JP, I know I kind of threw a bunch of issues at you, and you read issue 0. And I think it is important to talk about the first 10 issues of Solar are kind of broken. You get like 10 to 15 pages into a story, and then it stops. And then you get this like about 8 pages of this Alpha Omega storyline that's beautifully drawn by Walt Simonson, penned by Shooter. And those were all collected into what it is heralded or called issue 0, which is this book. I've read all of these, so I was focusing on one. You read this first. What was your takeaway from this?
Oh, I love the hell out of it. Like, I mean, I'm sure that you'll kind of dive into the art, but the writing, like, there's a kind of layered writing and layered theming that reminded me of not just in the subject matter, but in the format of Chernobyl. The way events are kind of presented and layered, kind of, it's like a bloomin' onion, this book.
Can you elaborate a little bit on what you mean by that?
So you take an onion and there's a machine that does like a mechanical press that presses on the onion and creates all these layers. And then you dip it in a batter. And when you deep fry it, the frying, like the batter kind of bubbles up and kind of exacerbates all of the layers. Do you need me to elaborate more?
No, that's fine. But going back to, that's issue 0 is the collected works of these first 10 issues. And there's 2 stories that are going on. There's the main story, and then there's this Alpha Omega. And what Alpha Omega is doing is Solar, or Dr. Solar, is actually a very old character. It's derived from the Gold Key Dell era. And he's a classic character. They brought him over into Valiant to kind of connect and bring some stuff together, but to use some established characters to ground the universe. And they're bringing it forward, and then they're attaching their newer characters onto it. And if you aren't familiar with their newer characters, actually, let me correct myself here. I believe it was only 2 that Valiant used from Dell Gold Key. They used Solar Man of the Atom and Magnus Robot Fighter, and both were licensed properties. But the other ones, it was to integrate, kind of create bookends, that they had 2 established characters, and then they could bring in their own ones. Exo Manowar, Rye, Bloodshot, Harbinger. All those were characters that were new, and they were merging them into one continuous continuity. But the most beautiful thing about this is Shooter was a fan of comic books, and he was a fan of the history of comics. So he didn't just reboot them. He tied the existing comic lore into these continuities. So there's a great scene in issue 2 where they pull out a copy of Dr. Solar from Gold Key and reference it in universe.
Right.
And it's this great double connection of it's the Ouroboros, man. It references itself to justify why it's doing what it does. It's a beautiful, beautiful circle. And to what you were saying earlier, it is written for a reader. And this is 1990. This is just before the image boom. People are not reading comics anymore. They're just staring at pretty pictures. This is the era of Rob Liefeld not drawing feet. This is the absolute abortion. As much as I've got nothing negative to say about Todd McFarlane other than his Spider-Man run is barely legible. It's a beautiful book, but it just has absolutely nothing going on with it as far as story. It's just a hodgepodge. This was a focus on the writing side. These were comics for readers, for people that were looking for context and story. It's a lot.
You know how you know that is true from the very first page?
Well, let's get into that, because we can dive right in. But before I get into that, I do want to talk a little bit about this. So these books that we're going to be talking about, here's Solar number 1. Solar number 1, Solar Man of the Atom. This ran for 60 issues from September of 1991 until October of 95 as a monthly. Most of these issues are in the $3 to $4 range. You can get the entire run for $3 to $4. However, I do want to be clear on this. If you buy completed runs, values will vary significantly. Especially the first 15 issues where Shooter was doing all of the scripting. And other notably, he brought Steve Ditko in at one point, and Ditko worked on both scripting and pencils and inks on these. Those issues can vary in price, especially on shorter runs. So if you get like the later teens, just like 10 to 15, you might be paying more per issue than if you start buying them piecemeal. But the Second Death graphic novel, which is covers the first 4 issues, it's 66 pages. It markets for around $15. However, I did find it on Amazon, but they're asking $40 for it. You can find it much cheaper than this if you dig a little bit on eBay or secondhand operations. Do not pay $40 for it on eBay. You can find it elsewhere a lot cheaper. But with that being all said, if you're looking to get the full run, it's a very affordable run to get. I mean, you could easily put this together over 2 years, eBay buying and just stopping at a couple LCSs. In a lot of cases, you're going to find issues, especially later issues, in dollar bins, if you have patience and time. It's not a hard run to complete, and it is an excellent run to read. I'd only suggest reading it up until about issue 30. There's nothing wrong with the latter half of the run. It just gets more comic booky. It's much more deep and introspective in the first 30 issues. They were really trying to stick to what Shooter was doing. But with all of that being said, and I apologize for being long-winded, let's dive right in. You said right on page 1, you can tell that this is a book for readers, and I'd like you to elaborate a little bit on that.
Okay, well, okay. You might have to help me out here because I read issue 0 first, so my timeline is a little bit messed up. I think what I
well here we can do that. So, but let me rephrase. So again, the first 10 issues, each book starts off with about 8 to 10 pages of story, and then it stops, and you'll get a blurb page. And the blurb page in issue 1 looks like this. And it says the origin of Solar, Man of the Atom, was conceived by Bob Layton and Jim Shooter. It was developed by writer Jim Shooter and pencil artist storyteller Barry Windsor Smith, inked by Bob Layton, colored by Janet Jackson, and lettered by Jade. Each of the first 10 issues of Solar, Man of the Atom will contain a free pull-out insert, like the one following this page, presenting one chapter of the origin, plus a selection of the largest single comics panel ever created. This panel, measuring a huge 26.5 by 51.25 fully assembled, depicts the incredible climax of Alpha and Omega. In both form and substance, this story is unique, an event that will make an indelible mark in the history of comics medium, a milestone in the new era of excellence introduced by Valiant. Once, long ago, there was another Man of the Atom. Long ago, his day passed, but a new day is dawning. And then what you would consider the first page of the book is this, which is Alpha and Omega, which is the first page of issue 0, which is really in the middle of issue 1, because issue 0 assembled all of the Alpha and Omega stories, which were, I think, roughly 8 to 10 pages in the first 10 issues, into a single graphic novel that was then released post those comics being released.
Sorry, I got distracted because I was waiting to make that very same Janet Jackson joke, but I guess that's the way love goes. But what I really meant was the way I knew this book was for a reader was because, number one, it opened with narration and an internal monologue, and it wasn't dumb. You know, a lot of times when somebody tries to tell a story, especially in comics, by using internal monologue, what you, the reader, get from it is, wow, this character is really stupid. But it isn't. It's an almost poetic narration of the events as they transpire.
No, I absolutely no disagreement. The other thing that this book features, and this is so weird when you compare it. I mean, there are some across Twitter, you will see people praising and celebrating their, oh, I loved Image comics were great. Nobody can never tell you anything about the story, but they always remember the art. This book is totally different, and almost everything from Valiant from this era is totally different. Most people can't tell you specific pages, but they remember the art. And I'm going to jump back into the page that opens up issue 1, and we jump right in and there's confusion on the part of the hero. And then what we walk through is a very, now again, and man, I feel like a broken record when I'm talking about this, but we talk a lot about beats and measures. We have since Ellis brought it up when we were covering Fell in October of what was that, 23. So again, here we start with a splash page, and we lead from a splash page into an upper half and then a split panel. So we're doing a 1 to 2, and then we break down, and now we're drifting into a 2-1-2 measure. This is that beat progression. So when you think of it, it's not, and this is so key for people when you're writing a comic. It's not just about what you're saying in the panels. It's about how the artist is laying them out and how that progression flows across the page. So splash to half page to 2 panels to 2 panels to 1 to 2. We're establishing that beat order. We're establishing the pacing that we want somebody to do in a story. And in this case, we start off with confusion, and then we start off with replication or duplication. Everything's kind of going along, and then he sees himself, but it's a different version of himself. And we kind of flow into a different story, and he bounces out. And then we have that confusion. And then we go right into hero mode. And then we go into the standard exposition application of we need to justify that he's the hero. So we have a quick moment. He goes to a prison, and he's dealing with a prison riot, and he deals with that. But he gets winged by a bullet, and he show that his physical form encapsulates his power. And so we learn immediately something. We're only on page 7 or 8, and we already learned something massive about the character. And then we jump away from that, and then he goes and does another heroic event. He saves a submarine that's sunk on the bottom of the ocean. And while he's saving that, that's when we get the break in issue 1, and then we go to the Alpha Omega story. And now we're going to focus a little bit on that, because this is a break. In the issue 1, we're now jumping back into the causation of how he became Solar and what the connection is to the old Solar, the Solar that came before, that's in the pop culture reference. So we see him pulling out the comic book in issue 2. So talk a little, did you find that jarring at all?
No, well, no, because from my perspective, this was like a flashback to me, because I started with issue 0, and this is where issue 0 starts. So I might have misinterpreted it, but I legitimately read this as if we were basically just having a very detailed flashback of the events that led to issue 1. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And these are done by Barry Windsor Smith, so they've got everything that he always brings to a page, right? And they're absolutely stunning. But like you said, man, one of the sharpest things here is the narration that leads into the story. It walks you through that inner monologue, but it's not an inner monologue like you're normally used to in the comic sense. It's a very introspective monologue, and it captures you. It grabs you. It's written well and sharply and succinctly. It doesn't duplicate that thing on the panel. I listened to a wonderful interview with a writer from comics from the 60s, and he was talking about so many people in comics duplicate what's going on in the art with their narration. And you'll see like a spaceship landing, and it's like, and then we landed. That's not done here. Shooter's well elevated above that behavior.
Well, I mean, that's basically Stan Lee, like his entire writing career.
It's the Department of Redundancy department that we it's this is Stan Lee. Shocking tales of redundancy. The worm, it's the worm. I'm the worm. That's Stan Lee.
Oh no, he's throwing a brick at me.
Oh no, there's a brick in the air. Let me dodge the brick. But that's not what you get here, and it's so refreshing because that's what
it basically it creates contrast. You're seeing a guy running towards a melting down nuclear reactor, but what you're reading are his inner thoughts. And even though there's a commentary on what's happening, you're also getting that kind of stream of consciousness, those other things that he's thinking about in the moment. Like, I'm never going to have kids. I never thought about having kids before.
No, for sure. Snug says Janet Jackson's wiki page didn't mention her coloring work, so I fixed it. Well, that's Miss Jackson because you're nasty. So, and then we get the pull-out page that's part of the and that's a whole other thing. But the book is very dialogue driven, and it's not action driven. So it kind of stands apart, especially this far removed from the 90s. It seems so incredibly different because the books that everybody talks about from the 90s that you see continuously repeated online, at least I do, are not usually ones that are introspective and well written like this. They're usually ones that just have, me like splash page that don't show feet. Here you get really great narration, really good, sharp dialogue, and really, really well done panel layouts that encapsulate the story. It flows really well. However, I understand why it doesn't get it, because it takes some intelligence to, you got to be invested in it. It's not something you can just flip through and absorb. You got to focus on the pages. You got to actually read the comic book. I know that's shocking to some people, but you actually have to read it because it was written to be read. It wasn't written to be viewed. There is a delineated difference there. But as we work through this, we get through all of these pages to start elucidating the background, and then we jump back into the main story. And this is how the first 10 issues work. Again, we get a little bit of story, and then we jump into the Alpha Omega. How did Solar become who he is? And then we jump back into reality, our continuity of what's going on. And
like
again,
Eminem.
Right. And when we jump back into that, what do? We jump back into that 6-panel grid, and we're flowing with that beat motif again. Long beat, short beat, or normal beat, long beat. And then beat, 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 boom, and we get that explosion of color. And it's that consistency again that, Shooter and Layton, this is what they're hitting on. These guys understand. They're masters of their medium. They understand what they're going for, how to capture a reader, how to tell the story in context. They're hitting all of their beats. And the narration, while it, by modern standards, might seem a little heavy, it isn't, because of how it flows, how it's written. They're using the language appropriately for how they go through and how they guide the eye, how they guide the mind, and how as you're reading it, you're fastly flowing through this because it is quickly paced. Even though you would expect a page like this to be heavy, it's not, because of that layout.
Another
because of that
thing,
beat structure.
Another thing I think it's really kind of interesting about this is because when you have a lot of pages that, like you said, are busy, and I think one of the things that makes it work is that most of the dialogue, most of the words that you're reading are coming from the main character, and he is surprisingly calm and cool, and he doesn't overreact. He doesn't become emotional, and so it creates these moments where, when the pages aren't as busy, they kind of like simmer together. But then when there is kind of an explosion of color or an explosion of detail, it creates this really interesting dynamic of contrast between the two. So you'll see an image of like the reactor is like he's in the reactor and it's melting away his flesh, and he just goes, this is really starting to get annoying.
No, for sure. And then, I think what I find most intriguing is, especially in the Alpha Omega story, it's so beautifully contradictory to the main story in the first 10 issues. It's moving at it's moving at a different pace, but it's much more introspective, like you said. It's focusing on how he's reacting to things around him. Whereas the main story, like here, it's the people reacting to the events around them. So you've got this delineation of the heroes looking at things and able to handle things in a different realm than how the people around him are. And I think that really works with the context of how these dialogues are structured. And that layout really, really helps here. But then you get these really human moments from a man he's got the power of basically the sun inside of him, right? Where he's on the street and he's talking to just average people. And the interaction here is, again, it's very human. It humanizes that character. It's essentially the same. It's the Mon Pa Kent situation with Clark for Superman. You're humanizing the character and grounding him, and you need to do that with overpowered characters, with characters that have cosmic abilities. You need to have them grounded in some sense of morality or ethics. And that's exactly what Shooter is doing here. He's bringing him down to literally, and I think it's almost brilliant on how Shooter does this, because he brings him literally down to the street level, which I think is almost like a little bit of a thumb in the eye to Marvel with their "it's the world you look out your window to." You know what I mean?
Also,
Did
the homeless people are hilarious.
It feels like actual discourse that would be had.
Yeah.
At a lot of times, it's not, they're not opining. It's just like, hey man, you okay? Like, you know, you good? Like,
he flies away, and they're like, "Hey, look at that! That's cool."
right. It's just it's shocking, but their reality is survival, and so it's shocking, but at the same time, it's like, that's cool, but it's gone now, and now I have to return back to my world where I need to eat. There's something very basic and human about how he structured that. And again, we're using that measured 6-panel structure, and we keep that the whole time. But at the same time, and as you look at these pages, as I'm going through them, they're using all of Wally's rules, right? The camera is constantly moving. It's finding different angles to make it interesting, but the camera follows how the discussion would go. So you go from across the street to above to over the shoulder to back around to looping through and then up and up close, and then you get your page turn. And then where do we go from the page turn? Well, now we start rotating the camera again. So you get the sense of action and the sense of motion and fluidity, even though it's just, you're talking 3-4 pages of just talking. But how that camera moves and how those perspectives shift tells you everything you need to know, to the point that you get this great shot. You could just have him reaching into the trash bin and getting out what he needs, right? But instead, he sets it up. He's got a panel that, boom, I'm walking up to the trash bin, and then you do a worm's eye out of the trash bin up, and then focus on the character. It's little things like that are, you talk about brilliance in storytelling and association and flow. This is 1, 2, 3 right there. Those 3 panels sum it up. It's Jim understanding, it's Leighton understanding, it's Comics 101 executed perfectly. And then we go back again, we're back in the 6-panel grid, and also I want you to focus on the color that's used as we transition. We're going from the street, which is gray and dull and white, and now we're going to warmth. We're using yellow. We're using orange. We're in a different world. The people are wearing suits. It's the delineation of the two. Normally, you don't ever switch scenes when you're talking about a panel, but we're setting it up here. We're outside a building, and then we move our way into the building midway through the page. And then what do? We also move our way out of the building on the following page. But it's just a transition because we're moving back into a different building. Again, flow, structure, format, understanding of how these things work. It's brilliantly executed by both the artistic team and the writing. Very, very well done. I do have some issues with how this exchange went. Did you have any thoughts on the closing of issue 1?
Well, I mean, to back up, I wasn't as a amateur diner historian. I didn't like how the outside of the building looked like your classic Americana diner, but the inside looked like a more formal restaurant. Also, don't ever go to a barbecue joint in the city, any city.
No, well, unless it's Memphis.
No, you're still better off going like on the outskirts of town.
Oh no, I mean you really want it to be like a ramshackle shack with a guy that's just, he's been cooking meat since about 6 a.m. That's
yeah.
That's where you want to go. But there's some good places in Kansas City. We can talk another time about that. But I didn't like this just because the even though they delineate, they're doing the differential in the character's hair. the white coat and the white shirt, just they don't offer any contrast. And I
I see
get
what you
what
mean
they're
now.
going for, but it blends a little too much. And in an issue where we've spent so much time focusing on the two worlds and the juxtaposition of them, to get them in one room where now you're dealing with some of the stuff that you've built up is just it
Yeah.
gets, it's not confusing. It's just, man, like
You
all it would,
you need a kind of visual representation of contrast.
right. And I mean the art here is fantastic. When you look at his shirt sleeves that are rolled up there in panel 1, just brilliant inking. Absolutely brilliant inking on the shadow and the line work. Phenomenal work. And it doesn't take anything away. It's just they've spent so much time on the contrasting that this was a little disappointing to see. But then we immediately fix it by going with splashes of color, and it really, really works. And now we've inverted, and we're back, and we start flipping back through this, and now we're back to our beat motif because it's always important. We've established that as that's our standard, and we're going to return to that chorus line. It's a song. Just like when we return to the chorus in a song, we have to return to that beat motif. It's emphatic on how you read this, that when you look at it, it flows that way. It follows a pattern. It's so important. I can't, because it's dialogue driven, it has to mimic that. If it doesn't, this would never work. And if you don't believe me, look at any Bendis comic. Bendis doesn't understand this, or if he does, he doesn't implement it. Here, Shooters not only understands it, but he's got a great simpatico relationship with Layton, and they're able to do the layouts and structures so that all this heavy dialogue, which isn't even really heavy, it's heavy by today's standards because writers don't have any input anymore in a lot of books, but this is a story-driven book that's relating on characters' relationships, and it's imperative that that beat motif stay there, because when you're doing 2 to 4 pages where you don't have any action, you need to have something drive you through, and the only thing you can do is the sequential art itself. And this is a textbook example of how you do this. And then where do we go? And
To
then,
your point about creating contrast, the group of homeless people aren't just wearing different colored clothes. The colors of their clothes, of their outfits, are like diametrically opposed to each other.
yes. So again, it's that stark contrast. It's that stark representation. But absolutely fantastic. This is it's a great run. It's amazing. I think it's the best thing that Valiant ever did. And I would say the first 15 issues of Solar Man of the Atom are absolutely epic. But specifically the first 10, because the first 10 have that alpha and omega story that is just exquisite. Man, we could probably do a whole episode just on that. But of all the things that Shooter did in his career, I really wanted to highlight this, just because I think it's his best. I think this is him coming out of Marvel with a little bit of chip on his shoulder and spending the year and a half that he had between leaving Marvel and starting Valiant, and getting his head wrapped around getting all the licensing organized, getting everything positioned, get his artists that he wanted on books. And man, for the first year that Valiant was firing on all cylinders, from that 90 to 92, so maybe 18 months, it's just absolutely epic what Shooter was able to do. And then sadly, he was forced out. But it is what it is, and finances and business are what they are. And people like Shooter tend not to last very long. The sun burns brightest, but only for so long. So,
how can I do something like that? Like you mentioned that he was forced out. Like, let's say I wanted to force somebody out of something that they started. How would I go about doing that?
well, he was not a money man. He was the brains. And so when you have investors, sales are great, but you're a dick and you want to keep on doing things your way, but sales, are what they are. So he was forced out because as investors came in, they made decisions that they felt were for the best interest of the corporation, and that did not involve Shooter's further employment.
So I need to turn to the investors of the gutter, is what you're saying.
Yes. You need to talk to Eric Grant, Kayla, and Arrogant Ape and get them to boot me off my own show.
Cool.
But with that being said, I think that's going to close us out for this. Shooter was a hell of a loss. Absolutely. My favorite person, I never got a chance to meet Jim Shooter. I had a choice at one point. I could go to my local Comic-Con and meet Michael Golden, or I could go to a Comic-Con a little further away and meet Jim Shooter. And I went to my local one, and I got a chance to meet Michael Golden. And I've talked about that a couple times on the air. That it was a little bit of a contentious experience at first, but man, was it fantastic. After he kind of understood that I'm a true comic fan and I really wanted to talk to him. It was a wonderful conversation, and I'll always treasure that. But in hindsight, I do miss the chance that I never got an opportunity to talk to Shooter himself. I live vicariously through Matthew Fowler, because when Matthew Fowler got the chance to talk to him a number of years ago, we talked for a while in a backroom conversation, and it was amazing. And plus, man, if anybody's going to talk to Shooter,
Oh yeah,
it needs to be Matt Fowler, because that just fits in my brain for who they both were, man. Matthew Fowler
Matt Fowler is the closest that humanity has come to creating an actual Muppet.
And I apologize for not touching on more of your chats, but Student of God asks, that was the entire comic. Yes. The one knock I do have on Solar Man of the Atom, and thank you very much for bringing this up, it is not an encapsulated book. Each issue does not tell a story. It is a broken story. It is a really multiple arc story that is broken into issues. And so the first issue is actually, the first storyline is 2. I think the next one is 4. But those first 15, no one issue tells a complete story. They all are fractured. And then in the middle of each of those first 10 stories are 8 pages of the Alpha Omega story, which tells you how the current Solar Man of the Atom is related to the old school Gold Key Doc Solar Man of the Atom. So it does get a little confusing if you're only looking at single issues or you're reading them without context. But it seemed pretty short. It's 30 plus pages.
It also does a lot with it's also very atmospheric, and it's kind of a world that you can become easily submerged in, and it's a nice place to be.
It is. It does. It pulls you in very, very easily and gets its tendrils locked in you that you are anxiously turning the page because of how well it's written. It's a beautiful, beautiful ode to what comics of yore used to be. It's not like anything modern. It's a very old school. It's a 60s, 70s semblance book, and you can tell that Shooter poured all of his love into it. So, but I think with that being said, we're going to close it out. That is, it's great to be back on the gutter. We will be back next week. But in the meantime, I am going to be dropping the link for the back room in the chat. So you are welcome to join us after the show is over. JP, you've got Eudaimonia 3, Goodbye, over on IndieGoGo. You've got Noirlum 2, Listen, on Fund My Comic if you want a signed copy, or you can go over to barnesandnoble.com or numerous other sites and get a copy. Anything else you want to shout out?
Well, you had mentioned incomplete stories. One series that is not incomplete stories is Noirlum. It is 2 90-page old school, gritty, grimy murder mysteries in old New York. One of them is about catching a serial killer. Book 2 is about just general intrigue and trying to unravel the story behind a murder. So if you want a good amount of reading for a decent price and a full story with nothing left unsaid, go check out Noirlum 2, or get them both. Get them both on Fund My Comic. Do it tonight. Do it right now. I said do it right now.
Right now. Awesome one says, ack, Jim Shooter. And, you know, just in the spirit. Let's go! I've been working too hard to give
the most retarded thing I've ever heard.
And on that note, I bid you good evening. As soon as I find the outro, because man, did StreamYards change stuff up, and now I gotta find it, and I can't. And yay! There it is. Have a great night, all. See you next week.
This is blood for blood and by the gallons. This is the old days, man, the bad days, the all or nothing days. They're back. There's no choices left.